My next guest is Barry Lee Cummings, founder of Beat the Cyberbully.
We started Beat the Cyberbully back in 2014, and our goal was to increase the level of awareness and education around the digital space. And our main objective was to reduce the size of the gap between what our children knew and understood and what mum and dad did. And I sit here with you in 2024, we failed.
One of the biggest challenges parents face today is this huge gap in knowledge we've got between what our children experience socializing online and how they use technology, and our understanding of what that actually means and the threats that it poses our kids. 10 years ago, when Barry created Beat the Cyberbully, the world wasn't ready. Schools weren't ready. We had to get to this point today where the separation in our knowledge is so severe with the inclusion of AI that the repercussions are completely devastating for parents and for kids. The suicide rate is increasing. It's directly proportionate to the increase in use of the iPhone. Depression is on the increase. Cyberbullying is on the increase, and parents are completely unaware of how to protect their kids online. This is a vital episode if you're a parent with children, or if you're an educator and you need to know how to mentor children through difficult transitions and protect them online. Barry, welcome to the Warrior Academy podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
I've known you for a while. My first podcast with you was 5 years ago, I think. 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. And I remember seeking someone out in Dubai who knew lots about bullying. And that was you. You were the first one who came up. And I remember asking you where in Dubai you lived. You told me where you lived, and I could literally look out my window and see your house. We lived in the same street. It was the weirdest experience. Anyway, so since then we've been mates, and we have been working together. You've contributed massively to our digital black belt program in the Warrior Academy that trains our instructors on how to mentor the students to protect themselves online. One of our beliefs is, as a martial arts organization, it's our responsibility to teach young people to defend themselves. But a lot of that defense is now going from physical in person to where they're more likely to be attacked, which is online. Paint me a picture of where we're at today, the situation, as bleak as it is, because I think parents need to understand what's going on, and then we'll give them some hope afterwards.
For sure. There is light at the end of the tunnel, but we're quite far in that tunnel right now. So we started Beat the Cyberbully back in 2014, and our goal was to increase the level of awareness and education around the digital space and what was going on. And our main objective was to reduce the size of the gap between what our children knew and understood and what mum and dad did. And I sit here with you in 2024, we failed because the gap's got bigger. And it's getting bigger because the technology is moving at the speed of light and will continue to do so. We'll get into this later, but the introduction of AI and how everything's moving, it just means that it's going faster and faster and faster. Our children are equipped to deal with that, and they're moving with that trend. Mum and dad are stuck. There's no other way of saying it. And I'm being asked questions this year by mums and dads that I was being asked by mums and dads 10 years ago.
Wow.
Which scares me, because this first thing, I'm glad that they're asking the question, because I have got into this scenario where I believe that because this has been an issue for so long, lots of mums and dads are saying, I can't ask that question now. I should have known that, 10 years ago. But there are mums and dads out there asking this question, and I'm thinking, that's a knowledge gap there. And it's contributing to this really bleak scenario where our children are being left untethered and with no guidelines or parameters and just being given these devices. School advocates for this, a certain year group, you have to have an iPad, you have to have a Chromebook, you have to take this technology, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to learn the way that our school is teaching you. So whether you want to or not as a parent, we also have to embrace the technology, but understand how to best use it as a family. And we'll get into, because this is a problem, but also how do we protect our children as much as possible, but also empower them to take control of what's going on. Because the reality is, and it's a direct line correlation between the introduction of social media available on the first iPhone and increasing suicide rates in and amongst teenagers.
Wow.
It's a straight line correlation. So we know the problem. There's no getting away from this, and yet still you'll see, especially here in the UAE, 3rd birthday, 4th birthday, 5th birthday, here, take it. Have the latest iPad, have the latest iPhone.
My last episode was with Dr. Thra, and we talked about child suicide.
Yep.
Obviously a very sad and devastating topic, but it's one of those things where we need to have uncomfortable conversations with kids, because if we don't, they're having them anyway.
100%.
And it really struck me, because it's one of those things where that conversation in particular was, you would think that you wouldn't want to talk about that sort of stuff with your kids because it might encourage them to look into it or to be depressed or to whatever it is. But sometimes the more you avoid a subject, the more they then they're more left with their own dialogue, internal dialogue around that subject. And
for sure.
You're not able to influence it then.
No, and this is the thing, is that people say, well, I didn't know about that, but if I talk to them, I'm introducing them to the idea.
Yeah.
I said, if you decide not to, they will be introduced to the idea by their peers, YouTube, or pick any other social media platform out there, because that's where they will find out about it. And as a parent of 2 young boys, I'm saying I would like to talk to my sons and frame certain subjects with how I would like them to receive the information as to how we're trying to raise our children in this world, as opposed to them forming that behavior or getting that education from Snapchat or TikTok and whatnot, where you have no control over it. But that's what's going to happen. So to your point, it's 100% on us to start these conversations and have those conversations, and for mums and dads out there to understand that we are going to have those conversations at a much, much younger age than we ever thought we would have to, because we look back on our own upbringing and say, having that conversation about certain subjects with my parents when I was 12, 13, 14, those same subjects we're going to be having with our 6, 7 and 8-year-olds, which again, is daunting and quite horrific to think about. But if we don't, then they're going to form and get that information from other sources. There's no doubt about that. And just to return to that idea of, the previous subject, because I think it is a very uncomfortable subject, and it's one that was not allowed to be talked about here where we live for a few years until very recently. But the statistics, and I'm sure that there's increased, unfortunately, is that suicide is the 2nd highest taker of life of 15 to 24-year-olds globally after accidental death.
Wow.
Which is insane.
And the biggest contributor to child suicide is the digital space.
Yep. Yeah, there's a direct correlation between their access to what they're seeing, to what they are being told about themselves in that space, to the messaging they get from those so-called influencers or idols that they put out there, right to what they're being sent messages by those that are supposedly their friends or in their peer network, and it's non-stop.
There's so many elements there that contribute, obviously, to a child going down into deep depression to the point where they see no outcome other than taking their own life. There's elements within social media like upward comparison, where we've got a false, ideal of what life should be like and what we should look like, and that's obviously driven by things like filters and social media, where it's like put your best life forward, even though it's completely unrealistic. But there's also other factors, this disconnect that we feel maybe as a family because we are separated digitally, right? It's like we're not always there.
100%. And this is, I've had a couple of conversations. I see we know Dr. Thrive very well, and there's a couple of people down where I am, coaches and involved in this whole idea of reconnecting the family unit, because what the example that she gave me is that, you could have a family of 4 in a house, and there's 4 people that do not know each other. Their mum, dad, son, daughter, siblings, and those 4 people do not know each other because they're so disconnected. So the point where the youngest daughter at 16, dad turns around here, do you want to go for ice cream? And she's like, I wouldn't have minded 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm 16. I want the keys. I want to go out. Can you drop me off here, please? And dad's like, oh, what happened? Yeah. But, and it's an analogy, but it rings so true because we're so busy doing this, looking down at the screens, us as well, the so-called adults in this situation, that we're disconnected. And in what I've seen is that if we can reconnect the family unit, then we start with a solid foundation to combat this whole idea of bullying. And, you and I have spoken at length about this. I say combat it because it's not about removing it or stopping it. That's, again, it's a sad statement, but it's impossible. It has existed. since time immemorial, and it will continue to do so in various different formats. All we can do is to try and pair and empower our children and ourselves to get through the process of when it happens, because it will.
It's whenever we talk about this, I'm always like, this is great, because we're so aligned with our points of view on this and our belief around bullying and understanding of it. I think if you have enough conversation with parents or with children who are going through it, you'll soon realize just how all the experts in this all agree. But it's funny how when I speak to parents who are kind of fresh to the topic of bullying, really, they believe that we can send our kids to schools or communities but it doesn't exist. And you see schools in Dubai saying that, there's a bully-free school or bully-free zone and all this sort of stuff. And the reality is we can't prevent bullying from happening entirely. We can limit it, and we can encourage people to learn about it, and we can really, what you said about focusing on empowerment is so key and so true. And something we really should be doing is treating the transition of bullying as if we are teaching our kids to cross the road, right? You look for the zebra crossing, the pedestrian crossing, you look left to right, you look for the danger signs, you try and get eye contact with the driver and so on, but you expect there to be danger. And so the key of empowerment is explaining and teaching someone that there's danger out there. Here's how you deal with it, here's how you prepare against it, and then here's how you defend against it and what to do, right? And so what's interesting for me is the majority of bullying is online. And of course, if you look back at 20, 30 years ago when bullying happened, even 10 years ago, it would have been primarily in person, maybe even physical. But now, arguably, bullying is a lot worse. They can hide behind an alias. They can be completely anonymous, and you won't know who's doing it.
Yeah. Well, there's two things there. They believe that they're completely anonymous. Right. That's the first thing.
So this is where the hope comes in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because this is also, but it's part of the, what you've identified there is this knowledge gap. Because the only way that we, as in we parents, can do that for our children is by having the necessary knowledge and understanding to do so. But at this point in time, we can't fall back on how our parents raised us to do that, because if you do, then we always start our conversations with, well, when I was younger, and then our children go, right, I'm not listening anymore, because dad's going to start talking about this weird and wonderful fantasy land where they went out when the sun came up and they came home when the sun went down, and if they didn't, they were in trouble. And I also say this to a lot of parents, and I say, and given the opportunity today, would you let your children do that? And 100% say, no chance. Of course not, because of the inherent dangers of doing that in this world. And yet we still see the online and the offline as these two separate areas. Oh, well, don't talk to strangers, don't do this. But here, have an iPad and have an iPhone. And I won't tell you or structure anything around it. Off you go. Do
you think we're just more aware of the issues? I grew up in that age where, you would go out and you would come back when the street lights came on, and that, the parents wouldn't worry about it. They would just expect you back, and, that you could go to the park on your own and do all this sort of stuff growing up. And nowadays, like you say, people are more conscious. Do you think that the dangers are more, that there's more of a danger, or we're just more aware of what's already there?
I think that it's a mixture of both. We're more aware of danger, but there is also, with the advent of technology, the ability for those of a predatory nature to organize better. And so, people say, well, why wouldn't you let your child go to the park on their own? Well, because there could be a stranger and they could get them into the car and drive off with them. And again, it's not publicly talked about, but in the Middle East, there's a ranking of, well, there's a child, blonde, fair-haired. There, we don't see those very often. And so when they're off on their own, there's a price on their head, as it were.
Wow.
And so there's genuine fear from parents. They're saying, okay, well, that's legit. I'm not going to let them go with the nanny, without a nanny on their own. No chance. They're not. I'm going to be helicopter parent and watch them wherever they are. But at the same time, we were also never designed, from what I've read, to know as much as we know about what's going on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
Social media has given us that advantage, but it also means that we're all worried about things that are happening all over the world, are hypersensitive to it, hyper aware, and then our brain kicks in and goes, well, if it's happening over there, it could happen here. I haven't heard of it, but it could.
When I look at parenting, I see it as this balance between protection and empowerment. And I see a lot of overemphasis on protection these days. I feel like a lot of parents, they fall into this helicopter role parenting. Society bubble wraps kids up, and we never want our kids to experience failure. They don't in schools, participation medals, all this sort of stuff. And we're doing everything we can to make sure, as much as possible, that our kids don't live an uncomfortable life to any degree. And so, you know, when you look at a parent's role, it's like, okay, protection is really important. It's the foundation, right? The most important thing you can do as a parent is make sure your child's safe. Before you start building their confidence or improving their concentration or their behavior. They've fundamentally got to be safe, fed, looked after, do you know what I mean? Loved and cared for. But there comes a stage where that protection, that overprotection can become toxic. And then what you actually do is you lower their resilience. And so then you are actually disempowering them. And
it's very true in so much of the digital space, because we want to protect them, and we protect them in the ways that we know how to protect them, and we push away bits that we don't know. And the digital, for a lot of parents of my age and whatnot, it's pushing it away because I don't really get it. And so I don't know how to guide someone on that road because I'm not entirely sure of the road right now. So I'll get to that. I'll just make sure that in the offline world, they don't talk to strangers, they do this, they don't that. But to your point, there needs to be, in the offline world, the ability to fail, or rephrase it, it's not fail, it's learning. Every time it doesn't go according to plan, it's learning. Why didn't it go to a plan? And what can I do next time? Because the idea of participation medals and all of this, I have a problem with it inherently, because it's not teaching our children about the world that they are going to become a part of, where it's not fair. And life happens, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But how you deal with that, that's what the learning is, because it's going to happen. Saying that you're never going to fail, well, that's setting you up to fail, 100%.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I would say when you look at a participation medal and what it teaches our kids, because ultimately all we're trying to do is teach our kids, right? We're not just trying to fill their life with nice experiences. The bottom line as a parent is you're trying to teach your kids. And so when you, as a school or a club or a parent or whatever, give your child a participation medal, I think you do more than remove a learning opportunity. I think that you actually instill a sense of entitlement in them. And I think that what you then do is you reduce their level of drive in life. And I think that as human beings, it's really positive to promote a competitive nature so that we can go and achieve things in life and go and do things to make an impact, to serve their communities, their families, whatever it is. There's obviously, you can go too far in one direction, which is where you get into the over-empowerment, I would call it, right? Where then you focus so much on empowerment that it becomes toxic as well. It's like, well, that's why I say there's this balance. And simply in a relationship, you've got one parent who focuses more on the protection and one who focuses on empowerment. You know, a great example is, you know, I take my kids swimming or whatever, and it's, you know, I'll throw them in the deep end and they'll end up swimming quite quickly. And I said to my wife, you know, she'll keep the armbands on my son until he's much, much older.
Yeah. And with the same makeup in ours. And that my wife.
I mean, we joke about it, but it's one of those things, right? And it's just, you find this, I think, in, you know, different relationships is different, the man or the woman or whatever, but there typically is that balance. A lot of single parents that I know, they have to be both. And that's really challenging. We do a lot of work in the Warrior Academy with sponsoring single mums in particular. In the UK, we've done that for many years, and it's providing them, because they have to focus on the protection. We're providing them with the empowerment side here and giving them the role models for their children. Yeah. But it's interesting that when you look at failing and you look at how that is online, because I think the reality is children have, as you call it, a digital tattoo, right? They have an online reputation. They can't afford to fail online. If a child fails online, it's a permanent stain on their reputation, and it's immediately spread, you know, throughout their communities that they're a part of.
Very true, yeah. But I think it's also this definition of failure, because if you are out there trying and doing stuff and you're not getting where you thought you're going to do, then, you know, you see it in the business world all the time. Well, there you go. There's an example of somebody that's persistent and never gives up, and they will succeed. Yeah. Versus, you know, what, I was out on a Friday doing this, fell off the table, somebody captured it on YouTube and posted it, and now that's part of my digital tattoo. Okay, well, that's a fail, in inverted commas, from that side of things, versus I'm failing learning. And so this is where a lot of young people, the statistics showing now that they're scared to go out, you know, won't socialize and go out once you get to those later teen years, because so scared of somebody capturing them doing something, saying something that is not really inherently who they are. And when we were kids, you know, we'd say things and do things, and that mistake would be limited to that community, maybe our school, and that will kind of be it. Yeah. Whereas now I can say something and it can be global within milliseconds, and then I'll be judged for it. Say, well, he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's a this, that, and the other. And then I'm on the back foot trying to explain, no, it was taken out of context. It was a joke. And of course, these are just excuses, or they're viewed as excuses because it came out of my mouth. There's evidence of it. And now we're getting into the scenario where maybe it didn't actually come out of my mouth, but there's still evidence of it in deepfake. So, that's a whole other story. But we're so worried in some cases about what's going to happen that they don't do anything. And this comes back to this idea you've already alluded to of this balance. Because as families, we also need to welcome the technology in because of all the potential positives that are there. And then we have to go back to this idea of protection and saying, but these are the boundaries for how we are going to use it, depending on the age of our children. And as our children grow up, the boundaries expand. Because you know what? They're going to have to learn that sometimes when you do and say things or push stuff out there are consequences. And I have this conversation a lot with my wife. I say, look, our two sons, they need to understand that there are consequences. And she does agree, but she's very much from the nurturing side of it, and I'm more from the discipline side of things. Yeah. So look, if you don't want to listen, you don't have to listen to me, and go ahead. Go and you don't want to listen that is hot.
Don't find out, yeah.
Don't you believe it? It's hot. I know. I'm not telling you it's hot for any other reason than to try and stop you from hurting yourself. And they're processing all this stuff and pushing limits and pushing boundaries, which is their job, But
the consequences are so much graver online. Like when you look at the digital space, they can't just touch it to find out if it's hot.
No,
it's too late.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then the responsibility lies with parents to know that something's too hot.
Yeah,
which they don't.
No, and this is it. This is the idea that a boiling kettle. I understand from my upbringing in my childhood that is hot. What's happening in the dynamics that are unfolding in a TikTok or a Snapchat conversation or in a digital platform where my children are not supposed to be, I'm clueless to a certain extent. And
we've never touched a boiling kettle of TikTok. We don't know what that feels like.
No, and a lot of mums and dads that I talk to then dismiss it. And this is very important for us as mums and dads and caregivers in any manner, is that whilst we may have an opinion of what TikTok or Snapchat or anything that they're doing in the online space, it might be gaming and Minecraft and Roblox, whatever our opinion of that is, we also have to be mindful that when our child tries to approach us to talk about that, and we say, well, why would you want to spend that much time on TikTok? Or just stop it. It's pointless. It's worthless. To that child, what we just said to them is, well, so at this point in my life, I believe that Roblox is everything. You're telling me that you don't care about this, so disconnect. You don't care about me, obviously, because this is what I care about. Yeah. You're just dismissing it, so disconnect. Will I approach you again to talk about it? No. Why would I? Why would I, as a child, approach somebody who has already showed me I'm not interested?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's those crucial moments like that, those touch points where we're dismissive or whatever of something they deeply care about, even if it seems silly and pointless and small to us, those are opportunities to connect with your kids. And one of the things I always say to parents when I talk about improving communication at home is meet your kids where they're at. Because a lot of parents, kids come home from school. What did you learn today? Do you know what I mean? What did you do at school today? What did you learn? Rather than asking them questions about things they know they care about. If it's Fortnite or it's this or it's what's the new dance move you learn on TikTok, and do you know what I mean? It's like you can connect with them, even if it feels weird because you're doing something you're not interested in. What you end up doing is building a connection which is more important than the thing you're talking about.
100%.
And then they're more likely to go to you.
Exactly, because this is something that my wife shared with me from someone on Instagram who's big into the gaming world, but how to help our children enjoy gaming, but also not have so much of the negative side. And this was something that I thought was very powerful that she said. And I say this to parents: look, if you do have a Fortnite player in your house, play it. Just try it. See what it is. To first of all understand that what the first message will probably go in. It's not Fortnite that's the problem. It's not the game itself. Whilst we have to take in consideration how it was built and it's built to be addictive, etc., etc. Yes, all that taken in. But the game itself is not the demon in this place. It's who else is playing with them, and where are those people, and who are those people, especially in the online scenario.
That's the threat.
That's the threat. And so understanding the dynamics of that is really important. But then as you understand at least what Fortnite is, what some of the language is, you can then, and this was the message from this, and I'll try and remember the name of this lady, because she said, well, once you understand Fortnite a little bit, now you can introduce the subjects you want as a parent in the Fortnite world.
Yeah.
And now your child is going, oh, well, we're talking about Fortnite, right? I love Fortnite. Yes, we are. But did you see that scenario that happened? What did you have to do to purchase that loot box? Why did this happen? And you put it into that environment where they're now, okay, at least I'm engaged.
Yeah.
Because as you said, that you're meeting them at their level.
Now they're learning important traits and life skills and values. And do you know, it's exactly the same thing we find in the Warrior Academy, right? If we say to a child, we want to develop your character, they're like, oh, I like boring.
Yeah.
But if I say to a parent, we want to develop your child's character, amazing,
Great. Yeah.
If I say to a child, we want to develop your martial arts skills so you can become a black belt. But of course, as the lessons progress, we teach through storytelling about different values and virtues and traits, and we develop this moral compass and this understanding of what it means to be a black belt. And so we're meeting where they're at, which is all the cool moves, the board breaking, the pads, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But then we're implementing those life skills and all the important things that we need to do, which then goes such a long way to developing them as a person. And they're more engaged.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems so simple to talk about it and say it, and it is, but it's the work that needs to be done, especially by mums and dads, to be in a position to say, okay, I'm going to have to do some work here. And again, I have absolutely zero interest in online gaming and Fortnite and Roblox and all this stuff, but for my child, I'm going to learn.
Yeah.
I'm going to play it. I'm going to download it. And I use this example when I do. I said, if you start a conversation to your 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, however old they are, can you help me understand how not to die as soon as I respawn in Fortnite? They're like, yes. And well, first of all, they'll probably say, you play Fortnite? Yeah. And then, guess what? We're connected.
Yeah.
And a lot of parents who are having problems with talking to their children is because we start those conversations with, when I was younger, and don't do this, and don't do that, and don't. It's always from the negative perspective, as opposed to opening the conversation with, could you help me with A, B, C, or D, and relating it to something they're interested in.
So many of the issues and the challenges that young people face and that parents want to help them with, but they can't, all lies in that foundation of connection with your kids. And you look at bullying, the first thing that happens every single time that a child goes through bullying is this breakdown in communication, right? And that's actually one of the signs and symptoms you can look out for as a parent when you're wondering if your child's being bullied. But this is why I wanted to start off this conversation talking about that connection piece, because it's so important, right? We can solidify that as a foundation, understand how to connect with our kids, which I think we've discussed well. And I think there's some really valuable insights there that will help parents. Tell me about the biggest dangers out there right now, the top 3 dangers that you think parents, from a practical point of view, how severe can they be?
Oh, yeah, that's a long list. Tell me about stuff that's happening. But I think one of the biggest issues that we have in this current time is young people talking to people they don't know. So it's access, really. And that's broken down into 2 things. It's access in terms of our child's access to the digital space, unlimited, if there's nothing in place. And then it's access to them by people that you as a family don't know, that they don't know in some cases. So we've got sites out there like Omegle, which is designed to connect you with people you don't know. And on the website, it says that there's a warning on there, because what it does is if you sign up to it and say yes, it turns your camera on, it turns on the camera of a random stranger around the world and puts you together.
Wow.
And there's an age limit on there. There's no age verification, of course. So people hear about it, they go on it. And then you've got tweens and younger being connected with random strangers who are doing all sorts on their camera that you wouldn't want your child to see. And they're intrigued. And then you get into the tween and teen years, and mums and dads say, well, why are they doing that? I said, because it's exciting. They are looking for that. That's the way their brain's wired, right? They don't have the bit of the brain that's developed enough to assess the risk. I'm going to get it wrong, but it's either the amygdala or one of the bits of the brain where, as we get older, we understand the risk of doing that. When we're younger, we'll run and jump off that edge and into the freezing cold lake, or we'll jump off the cliff. Something about from that side of things, because we don't have that fear. But as we get older, we start thinking, well, what could go wrong here? And can I afford for that to happen? Because then this, and this. And we're reasoning with ourselves. Whereas children, they don't. The brain is not physiologically developed enough until we're 25 to do that. So we also have to take that into consideration as parents, because sometimes when we're asking something of our children, our expectations are incorrect or they're unreasonable. So again, that's a little bit of an aside, but the access to the internet is the biggest threat, that we want to manage how often and for how long our children can have access to this. Not that they can't have access, but there is dedicated times for this, and also agree what they can use it for. That's the first thing when it comes to access, because that leads into the addiction, that leads into those areas where, well, if I've got unfettered access, I'll just go on all the time. And then suddenly, I've had that since I was 4. Now at 14, mum and dad are suddenly aware of some of the issues. So after 10 years, they're just going to take it away so you can only go on it for 30 minutes.
So on the point of access, I guess one of the biggest challenges parents have is the phone, because it's the most accessible device, right? They can access anything, it can do anything, and it's portable. You can, whereas a desktop computer or a laptop is pretty obvious if your child's on it.
Yeah.
Whereas a phone, they can be on it whenever they like. My daughter's 6. She wants a phone. And it's so funny. She's
like many 6-year-olds.
She's like, well, one of my friends has a phone. And I'm like, it's funny because I spoke to my parents about it. And I was like, when do you think it's fine to get a phone? And I remember the rule, they reminded me, the rule was when I was growing up, when I can afford to pay for the monthly monthly cost, which is interesting, right? Because that gives a sense of responsibility. Obviously, like it would be a cheap contract, pay as you go, whatever. But then to do that, you need to really be on a paper round at 11 plus, which actually ties in quite well to when most kids should probably be allowed it, preteen.
Yeah, so it's a question I get asked all the time. What's the best age?
What age should kids have a phone?
And it's a difficult one to answer because you could put 10, 11-year-olds in front of me, and there's 10 very different 11-year-olds in levels of maturity, of understanding of the world, of all of these things. The rule the rule I go by, and there's a movement in the US called wait until the eighth grade, which I think is the 13 years old.
13 years old, yeah.
Which, if you think about it, is in line with, if you go on the app stores, the age range for all of the apps that they love to be on is 13. It's supposed to be. Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, all have a 13 rating.
Wait until the 8th.
Yeah.
Like that.
And so that's where I would say, as a general rule. But again, you're going to look at your individual family unit and how you're raising your children and what they're doing. Because perhaps, they've got this class over there at this time and that one's got that class over there, and I just need to be able to coordinate with them. So, okay, well, do they need a smartphone for that? Or could you call them? Oh, well, you could, but it's not as convenient. And so we get into this scenario of, okay, well, what's the issue?
And not all phones are created equally, right? So you could give your child a Nokia 3310, which they can just play Snake on and send you a text message, right? And I mean, that might be a good stepping stone. They'd hate it.
Oh, yeah, they would not like it at all.
I mean, you might just be encouraging your child to get bullied at this stage. I used to have a Nokia, so that was great, But
battery lasts for ages. You call and text.
2 weeks of battery life.
That's our adult brains, though, thinking about this. When you're a kid, like,
they don't care about battery life.
No, I'm not taking that out in public anyway.
But it's a really good point, because if you deny your child of having a phone and all their friends have got a phone, then what you're doing is basically putting them in a position where they're different. And they're different at a time where they're desperate not to be different. They're desperate to be the same as their friends. And so they are more likely to get bullied because of your decision. So how do you approach that as a dad?
Yeah, you're right. You paint the target yourself from that side of things. But this is what we also have to do as parents, is we have to come together as a community in this to say, okay, the only reason my son wants a phone is because your daughter has a phone.
Yeah.
Why does your daughter have a phone? Well, because so-and-so said that they've got a phone. And then this has happened in a case study where you go around and say, well, the only reason that anyone's thinking about buying a phone is because all of the children in that year group have got together and said, if we tell our parents that everyone's got a phone, then we can get them. None of them have a phone. Right. And they're playing the game.
Everyone's got a phone.
And everyone's got a phone because we all believe that everyone, I don't want them to be left out. I don't want them to be the different
one.
Kind
of resourceful.
It's very resourceful. They're so smart.
You've got to reward that in some way. I don't know.
Very entrepreneurial, very good at, from that side of things. But it's also this idea that say, look, we are a community, and it always, again, it's a cliche. It takes a community, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's not so much the case anymore, because people are worried about, well, if I say something to your child, that you're going to come at me and say, how dare you talk to do anything? Whereas when we were younger, if I was doing something and the neighbours are if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to go and tell your dad, and all right, that's enough of a warning for me. I'm not going to do it. But you do that today, and it's abuse, it's bullying, it's and again, we've got evidence to suggest that the way that we were brought up might not be the most effective way, but there were lessons learned through that we need to find another or better way of teaching to our children from that side of things, because we do need everybody to raise our children. Because if I see a child about to cross the road and I see a car coming, I will run to take that child out of that dangerous way. And I would hope that the parents of that child would be grateful that the child was not just squashed by, a massive 4x4 that wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
But there's a very high probability that I will get why did you touch my child?
Right.
depending on culture, belief, all of this kind of stuff.
Things have gone wildly out of proportion. I mean, it's to a degree now where you've got to be very careful what you say. You know what I mean? It's very easy to offend people when all you've got is you're trying to help.
For sure. And just to bring it back to what you're saying, though, in terms of what do we do? And this is where I think that we have to go through a little bit of an ego death as adults. Say, I don't know what I don't know. Is there someone out there or in our group, our school, our parent group that does know? Could you help us out here? And from that, could we put some parameters in place so that whether my child is friends with your child or anyone else's, wherever they're hanging out and going for play dates and whatever, the rules are, within a margin that's acceptable, where if I have no rules in my house and you have rules in your house and our children are friends, then they always want to be at my house because I'm not paying attention.
Yeah,
and they can play as much as they want on this and do that because that. Whereas if I do at least have some parameters, say, well, I'm not as fully ensconced in this as you are, but there's a 1 hour limit on screen time. So you guys can do what you want on your, and again, this is a very basic example because we want to have the system set up there. But in essence, it's not connected to the internet. Let's say you're on a Nintendo Switch or PlayStation or whatever it is. There's an hour's worth of time. After that, we're doing something else.
Be great to talk to you about that, like a list of practical bits of advice that we can give to parents.
Yeah, for sure.
At the end of this this chat. Yeah. One of the things I think is kind of naturally happening in this conversation is we started off with connection being vital, connection at home between parents and children. But now that is growing out to community and the importance of community. It takes a village to raise a child, a warrior.
Yeah.
It's a case of leaning into the community, which is kind of like an old school traditional upbringing in a lot of ways, right? We were more connected as communities in the past, I feel. I mean, even though social media is around and we've got more access to connection, we're less connected in a lot of ways. But I look at one of the most key communities that your child will be a part of, and it's school. They spend 6+ hours there every single day, right? Yeah. I can't think of another community that your child's a part of where they spend as much time. So what are schools doing?
So this is a Pandora's box here of what they're doing. So a lot of schools, let's keep it to the UAE because it's where I spend a lot of time. A lot of schools understand that there is a problem. A lot of schools are ill-equipped to deal with the problem due to lack of understanding, knowledge, and also resource in some cases. But I also have to say that I've been in schools where, and this is not to do with the education, just to do with safety of the children, where most schools in the UK and other parts of the world, there will be what's called mobile device management software. So there's schools where, as I walk through the door in the UK, if it's a school device, everything non-educational is inaccessible.
Right.
All that's available are the education devices. Now, some will say, well, Chrome and YouTube, these are, okay, we'll come to that. In essence, it's getting rid of all of the stuff that you don't want the children on, so that if they're not paying attention, they've got access to the phone, they're on Netflix, they're on Spotify, they're on social media, they've got all of this. The mobile device management software removes that from the equation so that what they have on their devices is related to learning and the education process as we know it right now. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't every school in the UAE have this in place? Parents disagree with its implementation.
Why?
Because I can't WhatsApp my child.
But they don't need to.
Well, exactly.
If they so growing up, your parents wouldn't be able to WhatsApp you.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's a
helicopter parent.
Absolutely, right? And it's also
I need to be able to contact my baby at all times and never let them out.
And it's an entitlement.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm paying a fortune to send my child to your school. I should be able to call. He who pays the piper calls the tune. Well, to a certain extent, yes, but when it comes, and this was the pushback that I've heard from multiple schools, why we can't have this in place is because certain prominent members of our school community said no. And as they said no, they got this following behind them of other parents who said, oh no, I want to be able to contact them and I want to be able to have that and I want to be able to do that.
So we're talking like primary school kids here.
Yeah.
So this is parents who have kids who are 6 to 10 who don't want to send their kids to school unless they can send them WhatsApp messages.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Well, they don't want to send them to a school where there's things that are, they're an invasion of privacy or they are obstructing my access to my child because now WhatsApp's not a learning tool. Why would that be available? Well, you know what? If you really need to get in touch with your child, pretty much every school that I've been to in the UAE has a reception, has a phone, and has the ability for a message to come to them and be relayed to the necessary child, teacher, and so forth. But it's not as convenient.
This comes down to trust.
100%.
We just don't trust the schools. So parents don't trust the schools to take care of their children. Why are they sending them there? Because, I mean, ultimately, if you can't trust a school to look after your child without you having direct communication with your child at all times, then they're in the wrong place. You need to find a place where you can trust them.
Yeah. Or that you and this is what people say, yeah, but I need to be able to send them a message because I can't park here and I have to do this, and it's all around logistics and so forth. So, okay, I fully get that.
For a primary school student?
Yeah.
A 10-year-old doesn't need to know where you're parking.
Well, I need to send them this message because they're not going to let them out of the front gate to do this, or I can't. There's a myriad of what come as excuses of not to do this. And this comes back to this idea of, okay, well, again, there's lots of scenarios where you've got two working parents and this isn't possible, and you do need to be able to manage all of this.
Yeah.
But there are other ways of doing that. And the exception to the rule, and this comes back to, the whole military and the PE's prior planning and preparation and what it prevents. And but we can do that, and then the exception to the rule is this has changed. I need to get a message to my child. Right. Well, there's a method to do that.
Yeah.
But what I see is it's convenience. It's because I can't sit in my office or at home or in my car and tap something out, which is the expectation I've got used to now because this is what we do.
Yeah.
That's what I'm against. I'm against the inconvenience to me and the whole situation of my family as to why this can't be in place. And this is a lack of understanding of the opportunity cost of that.
Yeah.
Is why they have issues with cyberbullying, access to inappropriate content, nudes being sent all over the place, our children in danger. That's the other side of the coin.
For the small amount of extra convenience, we open the door to huge potential issues.
Yes. Yeah, and this is the gap that has grown, and we need to do something about through education, through awareness, through sharing as much knowledge as possible. Because I fully believe that as a parent, I'd like to believe that if I had all of that knowledge, I would have no issue with closing that door.
Yeah.
In fact, I would be doing everything in my power to close that door.
Can't schools just say, this is what we believe in, these are the rules of the school? I mean, I understand from a point of view of, especially in the UAE where schools are businesses, right? So if they make a stand like this and suddenly they'll be cancelled. I get that.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a way in which, a school could pride itself on its ability to protect its kids digitally.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting that you raised that, because I think that is where we're getting to. It's something that we've been advocating for the last decade, but I just don't think it was the right time.
Right.
We've got to this point now where the level of understanding has increased exponentially over the last 10 years. It's still too low, but now enough of us know enough to make us dangerous, to say, hang on a minute, this is an issue. And there's going to be some of us that don't get it, and there's some of us that are way ahead and have implemented multiple things to try and protect our children, but also empower them. I think that we're in this transitionary period and have been for quite some time as a society. And we're now at that point where the realization is a school making that announcement and being able to do that would be seen positively by more, where they're not going to see this drop-off of people wanting to pay to send their children to school, so they can now act
right.
on that.
Yeah.
But whereas previously it would be a case of, if we say that and we don't get this many applications, we go out of business.
Kind of devastating that the important work you were doing, you feel it didn't hit the ground running because schools weren't ready for it, but ultimately because we weren't in such a devastating situation that we now find ourselves in.
Yeah.
10 years ago, the problem wasn't devastating as much as it is now, and now we're in a situation where it's actually fatal. Like the data suggests that, like you said, the suicide rate is directly correlated to release of the iPhone and how kids are now leading into technology more and more, and things are only going to get, more intense with AI, and the separation of the gap between parents' knowledge and the kids' use is going to grow and grow and grow and cause bigger issues
if we don't manage it. And that's the key to this, is that it is a doom and gloom spiral. You think, well, then isn't the answer to this just turn it all off and get rid of it? And there's definitely some people out there running that school of thought. But then you would turn off all the potential positives of what this technology has done. Even when you think about where we are, and lots of us who are here in the UAE, we're expats, we're guests, and we've got family all over the world. And even just the simple act of being able to talk to our family members all over the world. What a massive tick in the box of this is what technology has allowed us to do. And if you think about even things like Facebook and these platforms when they were originally launched, connecting with people that you went to school with 10, 15 years ago and going, oh my goodness, this is what you're doing. There's positives. They're very basic, but then there's also the ability for, again, when I was younger, if I wanted to know about tectonic plate movement in Japan, I could write a letter to somebody over there, send it, and then 6 months later I might get a reply, by which time I don't care about the tectonic plate movement anymore. Whereas today they can flick on FaceTime, whatever, have conversations with people over there and get that knowledge and go, oh, cool, this is really interesting. This is how I would use that information. And there's so many positives to this, but it's about management of access to it and understanding what the potential negatives are so that we can cater to those and help our children understand what those negatives are. And it's this communication piece of saying, look, if you want these positive things, which, again, we look at it from an adult perspective and say these are really cool things, our children look at it and go, well, yeah, I guess. But I would rather play Call of Duty. I'd rather do this. I'd rather do that. But then helping them understand, okay, that's fair enough. I'm not saying that's not, we're not going to allow for that. But this is what could also happen if we're not paying attention. And this is actually what it comes down to, is us as parents empowering our children to make positive decisions in the online space by helping them understand what is a positive decision in the online space, because everything is a choice. And this is where I talk to a lot of young people now. Say, look, I can stand here all day and talk about this and give you examples and your mum and dad and this and the other. But at the end of the day, you're going to decide. Yeah. You are going to make that decision whether to connect with that person, send that inappropriate picture, say that inappropriate thing, waste some time on there. But have it in the back of your mind. It's like, well, if I do that, what are the potential consequences? And I know at certain ages you're not able to run those consequences simulations. But if you just think about it, and the way I put it in for younger kids, so look, if you're going to do something in the digital space, and you think about your grandparents, if they're going to be proud of you for doing it, do it. If they're not, don't.
Yeah.
It's really easy.
It's a really easy way just to benchmark it.
Yeah.
Give it to me straight. Do you think it really is a lack of knowledge and understanding from parents, or do you think they're just lazy? Is it a knowledge gap, or is it laziness?
It's a bit of both. It really is, because it's difficult to stereotype everybody into the same generalization, because there are parents out there that are doing a stellar job because they have that level of understanding, but are maybe struggling to communicate that. But then there's also a huge percentage of the population that are like, I don't care.
We know it's dangerous. We know TikTok's dangerous. We know people could be looking at them, but they don't want to have the arguments at home of taking the iPad off their kids, or stopping them watching YouTube. Or
and this is the thing, though. This is where it comes down to what I struggle with, because the only reason that becomes an issue when we get the meltdowns and the screaming is because at some point you allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
So if that at some point doesn't happen, and we from a younger age put these things in place, then we're not going to get this situation at tween and teens whereby I'm suddenly aware as a parent of the pitfalls, take it away, restrict access. But for the last 5, 6 years, they've had this opportunity to do all of this stuff, and now we're taking it away. And again, you look at the data, our children, and some of us, are addicted to this.
Yeah.
And when you talk about addiction, true addiction, whether it's in the form of technology, drugs, caffeine, whatever it is, just removing it can be fatal as well.
Yeah.
Some people can deal with it and go cold turkey, some can't. And so we can't just do that either. We have to say, look, this is this is mainly my fault as a parent, because I decided at 4 years old, or again here at 3 months old, they can watch because they're quiet. Yeah. And I can take them in the pram and I can go on my walk and they don't scream. And they eat their dinner, or they don't eat their dinner. I need to feed it into them whilst they're mesmerized by this pot. Then I wonder why they're a bit fussy when it comes to eating, or they won't eat without an iPad. So, well, that's a learned behavior.
Patterns.
They didn't come out as yet. We don't come out with a screen. It might happen. But we decide as mums and dads what actions to take. And yes, I get it. Sometimes you think, well, putting that screen in front of them means we can have dinner at a restaurant. I get the attraction of that. But, our own personal, we went away last year on holiday for 6 weeks. No screens. I've got a 6 and a 4-year-old. Wow. We didn't take any screens with us. They did have TV in some of the places that we were staying, but there was no devices.
Yeah.
And that was on purpose. And you know what? It was amazing.
Very quickly they adapt.
They don't have devices anyway here, but they weren't having it on the plane. We flew budget, so there wasn't screens in the back of the thing. And we went out and we did all the stuff that we wanted to do, and there were no devices other than sometimes some TV where they could watch the cartoons and stuff.
One of the things that we've done to try and prevent kids from going on screens and stuff is going to places where there's stuff for them to do.
Yeah.
choosing a slightly different alternative restaurant if you're going out for a meal where there's a park and there's a big area where they can go on the scooters or whatever over a restaurant you really want to go to, but you know the kids are going to be bored after 5 minutes, right? Or packing things that they're just going to be able to do, colouring in or whatever it is, right? I think if you just take a bit of planning, you don't have to be in this position where you are then building this habit where they are going to be addicted and reluctant to give up their screens or associate, you know, the going out for a meal with 2 hours of watching YouTube, right?
Yeah, definitely. And this is where I see, and this is not to sort of come down on everybody around this, but if we are going to say to our children, you are not going to go on the screens, we have to provide the alternative.
Yeah.
We have to. And it can't be just sit.
You've got to fill the gap.
Yeah, we have to fill the gap. Now, again, they don't have to be overscheduled on every single minute of their day, because them sitting there saying, I'm bored, it's like, good. What are you going to do? Because we're not doing anything right now. That you are left to your own devices. And then it's amazing as I watch them, because then they sit there and then they go, okay. And they go and find something to do.
Yeah.
And then the next minute you think, well, where are they? They're outside doing something. They're doing something because they've allowed their brain to be engaged to cater to that boredom, which their, you know, innovation and all of this comes into it, which a lot of children are not being given the opportunity to do so, because they are, I'm on this thing every minute that I can be.
How much of your childhood were you bored? I remember being bored like so much in my childhood, and I think, you know, we lived in the countryside, so there was and there was no screens, obviously, so there was actually nothing to do.
Yeah,
but you just found things to do, right? And
just being in the countryside, and again, you look at it then, going, this is so boring. But then you invent games.
Yeah,
you find other people that are also there.
That does so much, I think, for developing a child's creativity, for developing, you know, their ability to spend time on their own without having to be distracted, and to come up with things to do, and even their socialization skills and so on, right?
And definitely, and this is also, I want to make this point, because I think that in those moments, and you may have, let's for example say a child who is pretty good at art, even from a young age, you might think, I mean, that's pretty good actually. Fostering that in the offline world is fantastic, but I'm also very much in favor of saying, okay, there's a skill that they've got. We can magnify that by some of the digital art programs that are available, and see if they can translate that into that, because this is also part of this thing. We have to welcome in the technology and use it from the positive as opposed to pushing it away. And this comes down to this idea that whilst we've focused on access and screen time, not all screen time is equal. If my child genuinely needs or wants to go onto a screen to continue learning their piano, their foreign language, to do digital art, to do these things, if they are genuinely participating in that, and again, we can put certain tools onto these devices to be able to say they are, they weren't saying that and then they were going and doing something else. They literally did spend that hour, which isn't part of their allocation, but they spent an extra hour and they did X, Y, and Z tests in their language, and they're learning it. And then it may be a second language at home, and now they're conversing and think, okay, well, that seems to be working. Fantastic. That's not a bad thing in my book.
Totally. And I think there's so many gamified educational apps which are brilliant, right? And you know, I was using Duolingo the other day. I'm using it every day, and I'm learning different languages. And it's funny because my daughter was, can I have a go? And she had a go on it, and she could just do it. You know, she was learning Italian. I was like, whoa, you know, amazing. Yeah. And it's just incredible how you can replace, like you said, screen time with positive screen time. It doesn't have to be, you know, mind-numbing. I don't know, what do they watch, Blippi or whatever it is on YouTube, you know.
Or watching other kids playing the games they want to play. That one,
I'm still watching other kids playing games.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get mine, because my two are, okay, I don't want you playing the games, but I don't want you watching people playing the games.
Watching the kids play. This Inception.
Yeah, exactly. So it is this idea of understanding that, and then like we said, what's the alternative then? You know, sometimes the alternative is be bored.
Yeah.
I've got to do this
as a parent. Just let them be bored. Just see what happens. What are we doing today? Nothing. Yeah. Off you go. Yeah. Now see what you can figure out.
And then it's amazing. These are some of my favorite times, is then hearing them. And there's two, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and just listening. And again, you never want to go in there, because as soon as you go in there, then it destroys the whole. Yeah. Listening from afar to the conversation that's going on, that they've manufactured out of nothing. We're not doing this. That's not available to you. We need to do X, Y, and Z as mum and dad to just plan this, get this done. But whatever it is that needs doing, or that we're just not doing anything because we're frazzled, and we need to just sit there and have a cup of coffee and just stare into space and be bored ourselves. So you're going to do, we're, as a family today, for 2 hours, we are being bored.
Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect.
That's scheduled in.
Do you, your kids, same age as my kids, both of your kids, six and 3, 6 and 4. Do they get on?
I have to say, they do. And
they've reached that sweet spot now where they're starting to actually...
Yeah, and the older one is actually listening to the younger one and allowing him to have some impact on the game and what the outcome
Not
is.
just telling it.
This is what we're doing. You that, you're that. And there's this sort of conversation going on. But that, they beat each other as well. And, we're in this situation. Two boys. And sometimes, probably get cancelled for this. So we let them.
Right.
So, right, you two, they're bugging each other and somebody's hitting one and the other. And instead of jumping, it's like, okay, let's see where this goes. And one hits the other, no. And then they both end up crying. And which I say, right, so in this situation, either of you happy about this? Okay, well, could we have done something to have stopped this beforehand? And we use it as a learning, scenario. But the end result is they're both, have hit each other or been hitting each other or kicking each other as hard as they can. Both of them are upset, both of them are crying, and then we try and work backwards to say, okay, well, is there a way that we can prevent this from happening? Of course it happens over.
It's the hot kettle.
Yeah.
Of having an argument with an older sibling or a younger sibling. And at the end of the day, if you disagree and you hurt the other person, do they feel good about that? No. And so both of you are upset, right? And I do think there's a big element there of not jumping in to save your kids all the time and letting them learn from the mistakes they make to a degree, right? Until it gets serious.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Picking up objects and and it starts turning into a wrestling match. It becomes a bit more dangerous.
And it's also very important, I think, because we do these things. We try not to jump in, or we see these scenarios, and I'm also very aware of how especially my eldest can go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. And I think, well, that's a reflection of me because I can go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly, especially when it comes to them.
Yeah.
And so what I am seeing is
the reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, it's very important as part of my journey, if you like. And I don't know why I did that. It is a journey. My journey of understanding me because now I have these young people that I love dearly, and I'm seeing my faults in them going, oh, yeah, that was a very quick transition from
my teachers, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that they're punching each other all lightly, and then suddenly it turns into somebody trying to give the other, knock their head off, literally. I think, blimey, that escalated quickly. And to your point of, all right, let's stop that before it does get to the point, because I don't want to end up having to take either one of you to hospital because you managed to break something or do something to each other.
Yeah.
And it's getting to that point, so, okay, right, let's stop there. But then also reflecting on it, saying, well, yeah, I can see how I would react the same way in that situation if somebody hit me like that, and then and working through that to then put things in place for them to I think most parents would agree with this statement that you want them to be better than you and to have things that you didn't necessarily.
But it's all opportunity.
It is all.
So the way I see it is emotional regulation is so key. But they're not going to learn how to regulate their own emotions unless they experience the high stress emotion. If you jump in as a parent before they do, you don't give them that opportunity, right? So, if I see the my two arguing and it starts to get really heated, I'll jump in and they'll be working through their breathing for a few minutes, and suddenly now they're cool, they're back to it again, and it's letting them get to that point where you can actually then train them. You've got to get that opportunity, right? And a lot of parents, they don't allow that opportunity at all.
Very much so. I have to give my wife credit for that, because I would probably jump in sooner because it's almost that it's not. It is a discipline thing to a certain thing, but I am also trying to get better at saying, they have to be able to experience all emotions, not just anger, but their fear, their sadness, all of these things. Whereas sometimes you might jump in and say, well, you don't have to worry about that. It's not that bad. It's just a small thing. But to them, that's me classifying it for them. For them, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
I bumped my knee, and it's a big thing. Yeah. And so it's allowing them to go through that process, and that's definitely something that I'm getting better at, I think. Yeah. Or trying to.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it's, like you said, it is such a journey, and you learn so much doing it. It's kind of unfair that your second or third child get the better version of you, right? It's like you'd be in a parenting boot camp by then. You kind of matured and grown a lot, and things that used to trigger you don't anymore. And I look at my first child, and I'm like, I would have got stressed or upset far more easily than I do now. And now I kind of just watch myself almost in the third person if I find myself getting upset by something they might do, and it's just an opportunity for me to grow.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily have that perspective when you first start out. You
No.
develop that, right?
Definitely not. And it's something that, again, it's been pointed out to me by my wife, is that there's certain things where I have a level of that's not right. But she, and I am very bad at accepting criticism, especially from my other half, but she's right more often than not, where, yeah, but that's no different to us watching a cooking.
Yeah.
We're watching someone else cook the food that we want. So why is it so weird that they want to watch somebody play the game they want to play? And I'm sitting there going, oh, that makes sense. I don't want it to make sense, but it makes sense. And it's understanding that and saying, okay, yeah, I need to change that about me. I need to do the work to say, well, okay, yeah, you're right. So we need to figure out how do we build that into how we will approach this moving forward, in terms of me saying, no YouTube, just no YouTube, because we can't control it to the extent that I want to be able to control it, to stop you watching all of this stuff. But then being fair about it and saying, well, that isn't fair. And this is very much this idea of us as a family unit. It's not us and them.
Yeah.
This is how we operate as a family unit. So if I can watch these things, you can watch those things. If I'm going to spend this much time doing certain things, you can spend so much time. And again, of course, there's parameters there, because you say, well, I'm working. Legitimately, I'm working. If I don't do this, we don't have a house, we don't have food and so forth. If you don't do that, you get upset for an hour. That's a different level here. But at the same time, the principle is still the same. So, right, these are the rules. And even things like, right, well, we're going to make our dinner table a digital-free zone. So no screens at the dinner table, no phones, no tablets, no TV, no nothing. And in that moment, and we're going to write this down, so this is something that we have the acceptable use policy that we have, where as a family, all the questions are there. We're going to go through those questions, and as a family, we are going to decide how, what, when, where, when it comes to the digital world. And each of us as a family member is going to agree to that and write our agreement on the template, and I'm going to sign it. So my part of my agreement is that I will not bring my phone to the dinner table. Yes, there's probably emails that need answering and WhatsApps that need this and that and the other, and sometimes I will forget. Well, my commitment to my family is that if I forget and bring my phone to the table and I get called out on it, which I will every single time by my kids, then I have to go into the kitchen, I get out the Tupperware, I put my phone in the Tupperware, and I put it on the top shelf in the cupboard to show them it applies to me too.
Yeah,
no phone for Mr. Gower for Daddy. And this is very much how we bring it back together, to say this is not me saying do this, do that, don't do this as a mum and dad. It's like, right, how do we operate this together as a family whilst we're in the same vicinity? Now, if this happens at 15 minutes before bedtime and they're asleep, and I get my phone back for 15 minutes earlier. But
this is just such a brilliant way of getting their buy-in. Yeah, it's doing it together. One of the things that we did as a family was a gratitude jar, where we would have I was speaking about this before, right? Yeah. Gratitude is such a fundamental part of mental health, and developing that from a young age is so important, and so it gives you perspective in life and everything. So you have this glass jar, and you write down something you're grateful for, and you put it in the jar, and they all do the same thing, or you help them write it, the young, and then you see this jar gradually grow. And I think that's such a brilliant way to bring the family together. But it's exactly the same principle as what you're saying. We follow the same rules. We do it together. This is how we do it. And I'd like to end on just some really fast, practical bits of advice. Without getting into too much depth, I would like you to give me the most practical tips that you could fire off for parents at home to protect their children from some of the most devastating situations that we're surrounded by, right? So let's go.
All right. So first thing, it's going to be a plug, obviously, from us. But we have a increase your own level of education and awareness, and be aware of where you're getting the information from. So you can obviously go online, you can search all of this stuff, and there's going to be a plethora of stuff coming to you. What we did is Beat the Cyberbully. We built an application and as everything changes, we put a little bit of content in there. You as a parent will get updated that Snapchat's changed this, TikTok's done that, there's a new platform coming out. This is the rules that have changed, the laws changed in the UAE. You get notified.
So you guys do the heavy lifting. Parents just need an app.
Yep.
And they get constant updates of the important bits they need to know, refined, all meat, no fluff of what they need to, need to focus on.
Yeah. And I understand completely the irony of what I'm saying about managing screen time. Here's an app.
But you've got an app.
Yeah, exactly. It was the best way of saying,
spending too much time on your phone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Spend some more time there. But it was a way of saying, because after all of our sessions, mums and I said, what do I do now? You've scared me into action. I said, great, that's the main thing. As we change our state, we take action, and that's what we need. We need mums and dads to take action. So learning and keeping yourself abreast of those kind of things. The second thing I would say is, coming back to this idea, establish communication channels. How do you do that? First of all, what are they interested in? Take an interest in what they are interested in. Learn a bit about A, B, C, D, or E, even if you have no interest in it. Then apply this idea of open, safe space. And this is the key one. Hold space for them. And this is taken from Kevin Hart. He did this and talked about it. And this idea of trying to bring the family back together at dinner time. I grew up where dinner time, we would come together. And I know that's an old-fashioned way of looking at it, but I do feel that the fact that we don't do that anymore is contributing to this distance within the family unit. Yeah. And I know we're all busy, but try and get some time where we will come together as a family. It might be 1 hour around the dinner table, no screens. And in that time, open book. Anything and everything is allowed.
Yeah.
You can talk about subjects that you wouldn't talk about otherwise, use profanity, anything, and there will be no judgment and there'll be no punishment.
Interesting, yeah.
What will happen, is our children won't believe us. Which, no, you can say anything. You can swear, you can do this, you can do whatever thing, there'll be no punishment there. Yeah, right. Complete BS. I'm not falling for that one. We said, look, well, this is what's going to happen, so we're going to try it. A friend of mine who developed a piece of software that helps with safe browsing in Canada, he implemented this. Admittedly, his children were 11 and 12 at the time. And he said the first month of dinners, very, very quiet.
Oh, really?
Nothing, there wasn't the first month, it was the first 2 weeks. So the first 2 weeks were very, very quiet. At the end of the second week, his kids were like, this is boring. I'm going to say something. So they started talking. So then there's conversations, banal stuff, just what's going on, etc. And then they would start to push the envelope and say small things. They say, judge the reaction from mum and dad. I'm going to tell them about something I know is wrong or against the rules and see what they do. And they're going to jump on me and punish me and say, okay. And it was let go.
Wow.
And it was let go. And so the trust became part of this to the point where 8 months later, he's like, I'm going to miss dinner. I've got to go downstairs and do some work and whatnot. His kids came down and said, it's dinner time. It's our time.
Really?
Can you postpone that? And he's like, yeah, I can.
I love
rearrange that and came back because it became this ritual, but also this safe space where they understood that mum and dad were holding time and space for them to talk about anything. And it started out with the small stuff, and as the trust was built, the bigger stuff came out. And it might not have been about them, but it was about their friend who has received this, and this is what happened, and I don't know what to do about it. And
I think that's brilliant. I think meal times are one of those unique moments. Everyone's got to eat, right? And it's one of those times where you're kind of sat there for 30, 40, 60 minutes where you're not really going anywhere because you do it. And I think there's something bonding and connecting between human beings when we do sit down and have a meal together. And I think that's an incredible opportunity as a family. I mean, I grew up we would always eat in the evening together. I know it's difficult for some parents with schedules, but I've deliberately built my life around those meal times now. So we try and eat early now, whereas before we'd eat 8, 9 p.m. I now eat 5 p.m. and so I eat with the kids who are 3 and 6, and I'll go to bed at 8.
Right.
And then I'm up at 5, got a long walk, and I'm back for their breakfast.
Yep.
So I try and squeeze in those 2 meals where they're not rushed when I'm there. I'm sitting with them, and it's amazing because you have access to conversations which you wouldn't necessarily have, right? And I think it's just a fundamental part of the family routine if you're able to do that. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not able to do it because I'm so busy. Well, I just think parenting takes sacrifice. And I think 80% of people who say they can't do it probably could, but they'd have to give up something, and this is a responsibility it is to be a parent.
100%. And this, we spoke about this before we started to record, but I've been in situations where I'm legitimately asking them, why did you have kids? You're coming at me as to what can I do and how do I protect them and what do I do? And I'm giving you the answers.
Because they just have so many excuses for...
It is, but it's also, and this is where I've kind of extrapolated it and run this all the way to the simulations. So you know what, if to your point, not everyone can structure their life around that to get up at 5 and go to bed at 8. And I get up at 5 and I go to bed at 10-ish. And I get out and I go to the gym and I do all this stuff. And we're in a fortunate position where we can manage that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of parents can't. But if you run that simulation to the end and say, well, if that's the case and both of you are having to work so long and so hard, then maybe you're in the wrong place geographically as a family. And the UAE and Dubai and whatever and all of the positives that it brings, if you're working that hard to try and provide this life at the expense of the relationship with your children, what's the point?
Well, a great example from a routine point of view is, I would argue, 80% of parents could have a meal once a day with their kids. Now, if you're a parent and you're working a normal 9 to 5, well, the chances are you could most likely get back in time to have that meal with your kids. Or let's just say you wanted to have breakfast with them, because that's another timing where you could do that, right? You could sit down as a family and that could be your main meal. It doesn't matter when it is. I think the reality of that is, well, don't go to bed so late. You know, the same parents who say they couldn't get up early to have breakfast with their kids and spend extra time prepping it and doing all that, because it's always a rush. What you know, throw whatever cereal you've got on the table, sort of thing. You know, I just feel like, well, those are probably the same parents who are watching Netflix till midnight. And the reality is, you just need to make more sacrifices, right?
And it is feasible. And again, it's this lack of understanding, because if you do give your children croissants and cereal and all of this stuff for breakfast, that has a detrimental effect on them, growing, but their ability to function during the day, because and there's the statistics. I was watching something the other day. They were comparing eggs, I saw oats and steel rolled oats.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they were saying cereal and...
But they were hungry after like 2 hours or something.
Yeah, and they would eat, in one case, if it was just oats, not steel rolled, it's something like 81% more calories they would eat during the day, because they were hungry, as opposed to filling with protein and whatnot. To your point, everyone's like, oh yeah, great, sounds great, guys. This is not realistic. Say, well, actually, if you move it back by an hour, but then I have to get up at 5 o'clock. Yeah. But if that's what it takes to provide for your children, A, a nutritious breakfast, and B, the opportunity to be there to have a discussion with them and be open to what they want to tell you, is that not worth it to go to bed a little bit later to get up at that point? But it's sacrifice.
I also think there's something to be said about traditions and routines. And I don't mean old traditions. I mean, you've got the ability to create your own traditions as a family. And one of the things we do is every weekend, the kids know it's a weekend, because we have pancakes on Saturday morning, right? And we'll sit there for an hour and talk and have that. That's kind of, and then we'll watch a movie together. And that's kind of the start of the weekend before we go and do something outside. And I think, you know, you and I spoke about consistency with young people and the family unit. And I think a big part of that is it's creating a weekly routine that is the same. And so if the environment changes, you move countries or they change school, they come back to this situation at home where they've got that safe consistency, which provides them with more. It's easier for them to regulate their emotions as they go through difficult transitions in their life, because they've got so much familiarity in their routine at home, right?
100%. And this idea of providing them with this safe space is key to empowering them through things like bullying and cyberbullying, because as they go through these scenarios, which they will, there's something to come back to. And it's, in my opinion, mum and dad are still the best filter out there, because that's really all our children want from us, is our time and our interest in them. And yet we placate them with all of this other stuff because we've got a million things to do. And it's an older video, but it's a great one from down in Australia. It's from Master Foods. And they do this little test and they ask all these parents, if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be? And they're like, oh, what, dead or alive? Yeah. And they reel off all these celebrities and whatnot and everything. And then they ask their kids, and the kids say, family.
Well,
that's it. And you think, and it puts it into perspective, because you think, I believe what I'm trying to do is the best for my children, and yet maybe I've never asked them or listened to what they would like from me.
If you look at the investment in your kids, I think it's one of the greatest contributors to a happy life for yourself. If I look at people who have a bad relationship with their kids once their kids have left home and so on, it influences their life so much. And then you look at, okay, well, how can I foster a healthy relationship with my kids? Well, I think they say something like the return on investment for every point of effort you put in to your child's life before they're 10 years old has like a 4 times return. Yeah. After 10, up until the age of 18, it's like a 2 time return. Then from 18 onwards, it's 1 for 1 or less. And so it's interesting just how much of a return of your investment you get from just looking after your kids and spending that extra time with them and being present with them and, you know, being that present energy in their life from 0 to 10. And one of the things I say is, look, there's only so many years. I've probably got about 10 years until your kids are more likely to want to spend time with their friends like you.
Yeah.
And so I say to other parents, you've got 10 years of building sandcastles, so you might as well get stuck in.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
100%.
Because, your kids are now 6 and 3. So what have you got? 4 and 7 years until they want to spend more time with their friends, and they're going to get more an influence from their peers.
Yep.
They'll be going to someone else, not you, for advice.
100%. And that's built into them as well. As teenagers, they are designed to push away from the family unit and so forth, because that's what they would have had to have done way back when. So make the most of this time, because even as they push away, you're still holding space. And they recognize that, because when it all hits the fan, which it will in one way or another, there's always home.
Isn't it funny how teenagers are designed? They're designed to rebel.
Yeah.
And we're like, why are they rebelling? Well, we're like cavemen and women. They can't stay in the family to find partners. They've got to reject family to a degree.
Yeah.
So they can go and find another, community to be a part of and grow as a species. It's funny how we're so predictable humans, and yet we seem so surprised at everything.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. And we overcomplicate things where it doesn't need overcomplicating. Yeah. And sometimes the simplest route and the most straightforward, you think, actually, yeah, of course. Yeah. Why were we trying to go on this convoluted route where this is the simplest form of open communication, dialogue, education of ourselves and each other? And if we're talking about these things, then we have a way to communicate and come up with novel solutions to this.
It's all down to the communication.
Everything is down to communication. And the problem we see is that we as mums and dads have not given our children any evidence to suggest that we're here to help.
Yeah. Beat the Cyberbully. Where can we send parents?
So beatthecyberbully.ae is the website. We are on socials at cybersafetyuae. So we try to put a lot of information out there. And then obviously me, Barry Lee Cummings, Google me. I've tried to design my digital tattoo so that it reflects the right way. But let me know if it doesn't, because I need to do some work.
If you see anything inappropriate, just let us know.
Yeah.
Send it in. Write in the comments.
Screenshot it.
Link in the comments. Yeah. If you see anything. Amazing chat. As always, so good to have you here, mate. And there's so much value from that conversation for parents to extract. Some hard-hitting stuff, but an important conversation and a practical conversation.
Indeed, and thank you very much for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the Breakthrough Area Assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time, and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the Breakthrough Area Assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.